America has become completely unaffordable, and I don't know why more people are not talking about this. Half of America doesn't even have a savings, rent is insane, healthcare is a luxury, and somehow the narrative is still people are just bad with money. Like, what money? People are working full-time. Most people have 2 to 3 jobs anymore because you have to. At what point do we stop blaming the people and just accept the fact that the cost of living has simply just outpaced reality? Because everything is this expensive, you have to know exactly where all of your money is going anymore. Like, a budget is just simply a necessity. You have to have one. Started using a budgeting app like mine to figure out where all of my money is going, but it does not make up for the fact that America is too expensive to live in anymore. If you're struggling, you are not alone.
Living in America right now feels like a punishment. You wake up already behind, you go to work just to stay broke, and you watch the cost of everything rise while your paycheck doesn't move an inch. Groceries are a luxury, rent is robbery, healthcare is a joke, and somehow we're the ones blamed for not budgeting better. People are working 2, 3 jobs and still choosing between food or gas. Families are crammed into apartments because buying a house became a fantasy. You can't afford to get sick. You can't afford to rest. You can't afford to exist. But they keep telling us the economy is strong. Strong for who? Because it sure as hell isn't the people doing the work. We're out here treading water while billionaires build rockets, politicians trade stocks, and corporations raise prices just because they can. We were promised opportunity. We got survival. And what makes this worse is watching people blame themselves. Like somehow you failed because you can't afford a 1-bedroom anymore. Like you didn't do enough when the truth is the math just stopped adding up years ago. They told us to work harder, but never told us they'd change the finish line. This isn't a country full of lazy people. It's a country full of exhausted ones. Simple as that.
Right now in America, something is breaking, and it's not just economy, it's erosion of stability. Family who once feel secure are now struggling to afford basic, like a food, rent, healthcare. What even more striking, some of the loudest voices speaking out of former support of Donald Trump, now questioning the very system they are believing in. But here is a deeper truth. What feel like a crisis today for many has been lived reality for others, especially black community, for generations. So the question it is the temporary economic downturn, or are we finally seeing the quack in the system that was never equal begin with? Before we continue, I want to give credit all original creator of TikTok clips used in this video. All clips belong to their respective creator and are used here for commentary, news report, and education purpose only.
Where did America's affordability crisis come from? I think the natural answer is to point to the most recent inflation spike. As we were coming out of the pandemic, prices started to grow at a clip we haven't seen in 40 years. This peaks in the summer of 2022. We're able to get price growth down afterwards, but of course prices themselves remain high. And here we are 6 years after the pandemic started, and the price of almost every good and service that we buy in our economy has increased. And our wages and income have not grown enough for us to feel like we've kept pace. That is the last chapter of a book you need to read cover to cover. There was absolutely an acceleration of prices over the last few years, especially coming out of the pandemic. There are certain goods and services for which the market that produces them has deep underlying issues that require now government intervention, like childcare, like healthcare. But the affordability crisis, it's a function of price and income. There are these severe acute pain points right now, but there are symptoms on the price side where the disease is coming from the wage and income side. Americans are not earning enough money, and this has been a problem for decades. I'm going to show you some figures kind of explaining why I think that this is a whole book and not the last chapter. My motivation in doing so is not to, be that like, actually, it's not just prices, and just kind of explain to you what you don't know, but rather, we will never effectively design solutions if we do not correctly diagnose the problem. And there is a danger to ignoring the wage and income side, of just focusing on housing, on just focusing on supply of housing, on just focusing on the supply of housing in certain localities that have, environmental restrictions on certain building policies. That is, a myopic view at one of the symptoms when the larger problem is structural issues in our economy that have produced the affordability crisis we have now. And if we don't address them, they'll produce another one, some other manifestation, but it'll come back around again. So why does the United States have an affordability crisis? Because people don't earn enough money. And when I say they don't earn enough money, I'm saying that as a share of the economy, the compensation of workers has fallen since around 1970. So this series, which is from the Bureau of Economic Analysis that includes GDP, shows the share of our gross domestic income that goes to the compensation of employees. Okay, so let's start. The series begins in 1929. Way down here when the share of compensation falls below 50%. And I think that this is an obvious but necessary point to make. We never want our economy to look like 1929. It's not a good year to be compared to or alike in almost any way. So during the start of the Great Depression in 1929, compensation of employees falls below 50% as the U.S. experiences a minimum of 25%, but probably upwards of 35% unemployment. For the rest of the 1930s, it stabilizes at around 52%. Now, through the expansion of the war production boom and through the mid-century, it continues to rise, hits a peak, and then starting in 1970, kind of through the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and 20s, it falls down. And we are now, so when I say Americans have an affordability crisis, and that's a book you need to read cover to cover, here's the start of the book. We earn more, we earn more, we earn more, and we earn less and less and less till we get to 2024 when Americans take home as a share of total compensation as a share of the total economy, 51.9%, which is what we earned in the 30s. We are nearing a century low of how much money is going to workers. Now, that graph I just showed you is made up of two components: the cash that workers bring home and their non-cash fringe compensation. This is fringe compensation. You'll notice that they follow two different patterns. So fringe compensation, I got to keep going back. Fringe compensation has just been rising as we add things like health insurance and retirement benefits to individuals, to workers' paychecks, compensation, not paychecks. But we add health and retirement, and you can see it, and this is mainly health and retirement over time. Some would say it's health, some would say it's more retirement. It's health. And it reaches around 10%, and then it's also fallen over the last couple of years. This includes some other things too, including taxes. But what's driving the growth over time and the shape of it is health and retirement, and really the spiraling healthcare costs that workers face. Some of you are probably savvy enough to pick up on a severe problem here, which is the number of people that have no fringe benefits. So the amount of compensation that Americans are bringing home is increasingly reliant on a compensation that not all workers get, like health and retirement at their job. But this is the real problem. This is just the amount that workers take home in cash. So not fringe, just the money that you take to the bank on your paycheck. It starts at around 50% of the economy, and then it just continually craters since around 1970. And we are where we are now, which is a low kind of Great Recession, and now just this incredible low in the amount of cash paid to workers. A lot of these bumps are recessions. But yeah, that's the problem. I mean, the affordability crisis for me is this trend of workers taking less money home. Now, conservatives fundamentally disagree with this point that Americans are earning even relatively less money compared to the size of the economy overall. And what they would point out is that line that I show you is compensation as a share of gross domestic income. It's a notoriously volatile series of gross domestic income because it's not net income, it's gross income. It includes expenses that people pay in our economy. So GDP is the value of all the things we buy. GDI, gross domestic income, is basically everything that we earned. But it's because it's gross as opposed to net, it includes things like depreciation. And so if you're looking at something that's a share of a total denominator, what's in the denominator can make a difference over time and move the share of the top relative to the bottom. That's a long way of saying that they would tell you that the reason why wage compensation looks like it's falling is because of other things going on in the series, like depreciation getting higher. What I would push back if they said that the income loss to workers is a function of other things going on in the series is that series and economic measurement affecting worker income has not affected corporate income. And for the last 4 years are the highest corporate income shares on record. And corporate income is unaffected by the rest of the series. And it is taking home, I mean, the highest corporate income we've seen for as long as we've recorded it have been the last 4 years. And that is not affected by the series choice or the denominator. So when workers make too little money in this comparison, it's because the series is goofy. But when companies make more money in this comparison, that's just different. So I take this comparison of labor share of income with a grain of salt, because every data has its own caveats. But I think if you look at the diverging paths of worker income and corporate income, it paints a pretty clear picture of what has happened in the U.S. over the past 70 years. That doesn't mean that we know how to make sense of it, that we know exactly what caused it, or we know exactly what to do about it. But we do know that the amount of money that workers bring home has been falling. And the affordability crisis is a function of that as much as it is housing over the last 2 years. We have to make a shift in our economy of how workers are paid. And I think that it makes the problem seem bigger, but of course that invites a solution that is bolder and one that will address the problems we have. And yeah, affordability is much bigger than price when you remember that it's about income. And when it comes to incomes, we have work to do, work that needs doing.
So what we are seeing now is not just about high price, it's about people starting to understand how the system really works. Many families are struggling today, but for others, this has been their life for so long. Now the big question is this: will anything change, or will people forget also things get a little better? Let me know what you think. If you are new here, please can consider subscribe, like, share. Don't forget to leave a comment. And for returning subscriber, thank you so much for your support. Really, we appreciate. See you in another video.